committee are therefore in attendance, one way or the other. Welcome to those that have come to join us tonight, too, and we'll get right down to business. First order is approval of minutes from our meeting of 2/2/2021. Do I have a motion to approve? I have a motion from Watson. Do I have a second? I have a second from Rasmussen. Any changes or questions regarding the minutes? Seeing none, all approving, please say aye.
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 Aye. And do we have ayes from WebEx? I'm not hearing anything from Alders Killian and McElhaney. Perhaps they're not hearing me.
All right. Can you all hear Tom?
Hello, can you hear me? I'm getting no acknowledgement. Can anybody out there hear me?
Can anyone hear me? I thought Pat heard me earlier.
Can anybody on WebEx hear us?
Apparently not. And you have your microphone on, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yep, it is.
Yeah, the master's on it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be hearing.
Yeah.
Okay,
It was.
want to undo that? Okay. All right, can people on WebEx hear us now?
No. Great. Try it now.
Hello, can anybody hear me on WebEx? I'm
There,
getting a
I
nod.
can. Got it.
Okay, good. All right, thank you. Well, we thought you were hearing us when we got started, and we did have a motion to approve the minutes from our meeting of 2/2 of this year. And I had just asked if there were any questions or concerns regarding those minutes. Do you have any? Seeing none, then I think we're ready to vote to approve the minutes. All in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. All right, moving on. Item number 2, discussion and possible action on compliance, a development agreement by Collaborative Consulting, Inc., doing business as Collaborative Domestic Solutions Center, Wausau, LLC. Sean, you want to kick it off for us?
Sure, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. This is a involved and complex issue, and I appreciate a few minutes of your time. Okay, there we go. Thank you, Chair Neal. This is an involved and complex issue, and I appreciate your time reading through the materials and allowing me to explain this. I know, in fact, a number of council members, and I know there have been a number of campaigns previously that had ran on the issue of the city not following up on some of the development agreements that it's had previously. This is one that at least I came on board last year. This is one that was brought to my attention in December to follow up on, and it involves a development agreement with Collaborative Domestic Solutions Center, or Collaborative Consulting, that was set up by the city in February 2012. At that time, the company moved to the community, was promising to bring 200 jobs in exchange for $200,000 in TIF financing. There was a jobs requirement associated with the reporting on that on an annual basis. And at the time that 5-year reporting period ended in February 2017, the company, at that point, had 103 jobs. I think the highest they achieved was 159 jobs in February of 2015. about 2 or 3 months before that 5-year window closed, Collaborative Consulting was acquired by CGI Group, which is another firm that Collaborative had several locations. CGI bought a number of those locations, including Wausau. They were not familiar with this development agreement at the time, and as I indicated in my staff memo, they did not enjoy any of the benefits of this development agreement and the TIF funding that was provided. Nonetheless, they did have some their corporate attorney had some conversations with the city's attorney. They recognized that as part of their part of the acquisition of Collaborative Consulting, they did not accede to the obligations of the agreement. We're presenting this to the Economic Development Committee at this point for you to review, hoping that we can come to some measure of closing out and satisfying this development agreement. The city attorney and our office has identified 3 different ways that this development agreement can be satisfied. The first option would be to waive the jobs requirement, and that could be in recognition of the activities that CGI has provided in the community in the time since the development agreement job creation period ended. A second one would be to modify the development agreement and require some kind of job creation or job maintenance going forward from this period for a year or 2. I guess how that's crafted can be discussed and determined. Another measure would be to seek a reimbursement of a portion of the funds that were provided to CGI, or all of those funds, I guess would be the limit that we could go to on this. I did provide some background on CGI in the staff memo. We do have with us today Will LaBar. Will is the Vice President of U.S. Onshore Services for CGI. He's been working with the city cooperatively in the 3 months since we've been investigating this matter, putting it together so that we could prepare it for the Economic Development Committee today.
It does look like Tom Killian might have a question as well.
Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I guess this, when I read about this in the packet, this is really something that winds me up. And I'll say that, or first I want to clarify that the failure that took place here to follow up and ensure compliance with the development agreement is absolutely not Mr. Fitzgerald's fault. It is likely absolutely Chris Schock's fault, and he's not here anymore. And, now, I guess for us to point fingers doesn't matter. But in 2014, this committee was super frustrated about the fact that there was lacking follow-up on development agreements to ensure that people were holding up their end of the bargain. And at that point, the solution was that the department would implement a very detailed spreadsheet and track it on a routine basis to make sure that development agreements were being followed and that compliance was being achieved and that benchmarks were being met. And in that early stage, we were getting reports in the committee as to the progress of certain developments, especially larger ones where things were under construction and hiring was in process. But as development agreements age and projects, appear to be complete and places get established, I think that follow-up must have laxed at some point. In 2015 or 2016, when this issue was fresh, prior to the sale, the solution would have been easy. It would have been to claw back all of the money because they never reached 100% of their goal. The current owner didn't get any of those benefits. All they inherited was a agreement that's basically in default that they didn't know about. But that doesn't necessarily mean that TID 3 isn't still out $200,000 and we're short 140 jobs. And, even though they have increased the average salary of those jobs by almost $20,000 a year, which we certainly appreciate. They're hiring for 25 new positions. We appreciate that too. Even if that's completed, they'll still be sitting at approximately or just under 50% of what the original promise was. And when Collaborative came, I was on the council at that time, and this city and a number of entities, WEDC down in Madison, their former landlord, the city, everybody was bending over backwards to get collaborative consulting to kick off a wave of growth. And we gave and gave and gave, and they didn't deliver. And so now, I feel like as an entity that should have been following up on this, our team has been asleep, or we've been asleep at the switch for 4 years. And they've been operating out of compliance. And so now what do? Go to the new owner and say, sorry, we're 4 years late to the table, but we'd like our money? Or a percentage of our money? I mean, I don't feel comfortable just saying, well, in spirit, they did the best they could, they're in compliance. They're not, and they won't be. So, I think that we need to find a solution that recognizes that we take our development agreements seriously. Now, whether or not we'll be able to recover any of that this late into the process, we look pretty ridiculous trying to claw back 4 years late after we absolutely should have been aware of this situation in this committee, and we were not. And, I think that to just waive off the jobs requirement and just call it no harm, no foul, I think that isn't right either. So, maybe we need to talk about either a new development agreement or a modified one that sets a new benchmark. And, maybe we need to give a little time for them to get in compliance, but at the end of the day, I feel like just shrugging this off isn't right either. So I think as a committee, we need to kind of talk this through. But it's really, really upsetting to find out 5-6 years later what we should have known back then.
Thank you.
Alder Killian has a comment.
I'll get to Alder Killian in a moment. I was concerned reading the agreement that it just seemed there was some contradictory language in there. Certainly not anything in terms of specific clawback language, which we would have liked to have seen. But it just seemed odd that, first of all, it was referred to as a grant rather than like a forgivable loan. Then it said after 5 years, if they met their 200, employee benchmark, that it would be forgiven, per se. At the same time, during that 5-year period, for every year that they remained in Wausau, we shave off 20%, which means after year 4, for instance, they're still in compliance because year 5 was their end date to hit that 200. They could have done it on the last day of the year. So in the meantime, 20, 40, 60, 80, we're getting taken off by the language of this document, just by the fact that they were still in Wausau. There is no clear clawback language. There's nothing really actionable there that I can see other than perhaps that 5th year's remainder, was it $40,000, would maybe be a target for the original company. We certainly can't turn around and try to find some of that from, the now, operating company. It wasn't their agreement, and it wasn't, hashed out with them when they took over. So this really bothers me. The language, it was just terribly written, and I don't know how it got through with contradictory language in it. Now, I do have Alder Killian here, so I'll just say that I think it would be great to have a talk with this new company. I'm sorry, I don't have the name on top of my head. But they seem to be in good faith and are moving forward, not backward. And they're very community involved and valued partners, I think, in our economy here. So, lessons learned, but I certainly don't see trying to go after them to make up for our mistakes. Alder Killian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have some questions for Attorney Jacobson, and then I'll have some comments following that. So if I could please ask the city attorney a few questions.
You may, if the chair says you can, I'm here.
Thank you. I'm seeing older Neil and not the podium, so I did not know exactly where you were, Attorney Jacobson, but thank you for being willing to answer some questions. It appears that really we have a contract matter here, and let me ask you, to your knowledge, was this a merger or an acquisition with CGI and Collaborative?
I believe the attorney for CGI, and Mr. Labar can correct me if I'm wrong, did confirm to me that that CGI acquired Collaborative Consulting through a merger and not through just a acquisition of their assets. And so there is no disagreement that pursuant to the last paragraph of this short agreement, it says it shall be binding upon and inure to the benefit of and be enforceable by the parties and their successors. So there's no question that whether or not they didn't see it as they said they didn't see it, or benefit from any of the money paid to Collaborative, they do accede to this development agreement. Which
Thank you.
I will note was not reviewed
there's
by
no
my
dispute
office.
then among attorneys for the city and the other party that CGI is bound to this agreement. Is that a correct understanding?
I think so, yes.
Thank you. And then in the language of this contract and agreement, and it was, I believe, referred to this in the packet as well as a jobs requirement. That was never really presented as simply a suggestion or an elective. Is that correct in terms of the agreement?
That's correct. It is in the development agreement. It's a very short agreement, but it is under paragraph 2D and 3B that they must submit employment records until they reach 200 employees, at which time the employment criteria will be satisfied. And 3B says they have 5 years to meet the total employment numbers of 200 projected and committed to be based in Wausau, and is outlined by the agreement, which was executed on February 14th of 2012. So they would have had until 2017.
So that clock is up. Thank you. And then one additional question, given the time frame and so forth. Where we are now in 2021, is there a kind of a shelf life, or it was brought up earlier that we might be embarrassed about this? Is there a shelf life or a level of embarrassment that would invalidate this agreement at this point?
I'm not sure I know what you're referring to, but I don't believe so. Are you referring to like a statute of limitations or some
Sure,
legal theory that would prevent us from collecting? I don't know what the other side might allege if there were a suit. As I said, my office had not reviewed this agreement, and yes, it was before we had them prepared by outside counsel, and Chair Neal is correct, it does not contain any clawback language per se that says, and if you don't meet this goal, then this is what's going to happen. That is true, but we believe that we could pursue repayment in a collection action as a remedy for a breach of the agreement, the breach being not meeting the jobs requirements. And if I might add a few more facts, really there's a number of grants under this agreement. So there was 20,000 of CDBG grants, which was expended on 5/17 of 12. There was a $15,000 McDevco training grant. Those were both given under 1A and 1B. 1,000 of the 10,000 TIF 3 grant was expended on 11/15 of 13, and finally only 5,000 of the $40,000 down payment assistance was expended on 11/15/13, which brings us to 41,000 plus the $200,000 forgivable grant, loan, whatever we want to call it. And you're right, that's, that would be up for a finding of fact by a court, I think, whether or not that's really enforceable. So when we looked at this in early 2019 and drafted a potential demand letter, which was never sent, we were looking for repayment then of $241,000.
Thank you, Attorney Jacobson. That is very useful information, and I just have some comments following that. I've already received a good deal of feedback on this matter from our citizens who we serve, and I think there was some very astute feedback, and one particular comment that I fielded suggested that we would be setting a very poor and perhaps treacherous precedent by not enforcing this agreement due to just a simple change in the corporate pedigree when our attorney is stating to us that the CGI is still bound to this agreement. And as Attorney Jacobson said, it was rather explicit that this was a jobs requirement and not a simple suggestion, and it was that target was not hit. And lastly, it appears that Attorney Jacobson had quantified the amount that we were going to send a demand letter for, $241,000. So I don't see this as actually too convoluted of an issue. What I see is the city of Wausau had an agreement. That agreement was not satisfied, and now we would send a demand letter to collect the funds due to the lack of satisfaction of those terms. So I would make a motion to fully enforce the agreement at hand and to allow our city attorney or outside counsel, if necessary, but our legal counsel to make the appropriate relevant demands. But I think we should fully and strictly enforce this agreement. So that's a motion. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor. Do I have a second for that motion?
I'll second the motion, but I have a question.
We have a second. Okay, we'll continue discussion. What's your question, Alder?
Okay, so did I hear you right, Ann, that a demand letter, that it was determined that they were out of compliance at the end of 2014 and a demand letter was written to deliver to them to make good on this contract at that time?
Yes,
And that letter was not sent?
correct.
To me, that sheds a whole new light on it. They knew, and they chose to do nothing.
Yeah, we were asked to prepare it. It's dated January 4th, 2019. And then for some reason, I was asked, I believe my memory is I was asked to hold on it until Chris could try to get a hold of somebody at the company, and I never heard anything after that.
Was that direction from their department or Mayor Tipple?
I don't recall, Lisa, I'm sorry.
That gives me a new perspective on some of this. And, under those circumstances, they knew over 5 years ago that this was out of compliance. They did not tell this committee. As soon as that letter was being drafted, one of those folks should have come into this committee and told us what was happening so we could decide what action was to be taken. $200,000 of that grant was TID cash. We deal with that here. And so based on that, even though it's 2 administrations ago, these things are still cropping up. Agreements like this that were vague without firm clawback language are the exact reason we had agreement problems between 2008 and 2016. We had all kinds of them. And it's not about being embarrassed, it's about legal recourse. And I think based on the answers that our city attorney gave to Alder Killian, I agree with him. And, I think that we need to enforce the development agreement. I guess, under the circumstances, I'm just not willing to shrug this off. So I agree with him, and I think we should move forward with the collection.
Thank you. It's really interesting because, the idea of merger did not, really, jump out at me going through the notes. So if it was indeed a merger, not a transfer per se, that does shed a different light on the subject. But I am really concerned about the 20% per year for 5 years, which was part and parcel of the same agreement. Not spelled out very well, but it says, for every year that you stay in Wausau, we shave 20% off. It doesn't say, and you add X number of employees per year. That whole target for employees was by the end of the 5th year. Now, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm ticked off as much as anybody is about this. I don't know what legal standing we have to go say, you know, we should be getting $200,000 or $241,000 back when the language of the document says we'll shave off 20% every year that you are still here. Which brings me back to, I almost see a maximum here of $40,000 because that last, you could say the fifth year was not in compliance. But they were in compliance for the first 4 because they were here.
Yep, and that is another option, to say they were present for those 5 years, therefore that $200,000 is forgivable, and for the breach, we're only gonna seek repayment of the $41,000. That is another position that you could take.
Mary
Alder
Ann?
Watson.
I just had, so the memo was drafted by the city back, so I
A
guess
demand letter,
yeah,
not a memo, a demand letter.
okay, the demand letter. So
Yep.
when was it written and why wasn't it sent? Who said not to send it?
It was prepared, I was requested to have it prepared, it's dated January 4th of 2019, so we were probably talking about it in December of 2018. I just recall there were a lot of general conversations going back and forth, and Chris was supposed to be talking to somebody there or finding a contact person there, and then he was gonna get back to us, and I never heard anything. I think I followed up a couple times and asked, is this going out or not, and I was told to hold it, and I don't remember by whom. I mean, from 2016 to 2020, it would have been Mayor Milky.
Right, but 20,
That was
I thought
here,
it was
but they-
2014, you said.
Mary Ann is commenting here.
The demand letter, 2014, I thought you said.
2019,
Mary Ann is
January
commenting.
4th of 2019, the demand letter
There-
was
That's what she
written.
was commenting, so.
So it wasn't like
Okay, I'm sorry, Mary Ann had a comment? Can you read it for us? Or just, there she is.
I could tell there was some confusion on the date of the letter. It was January of 2019. So
Right.
not 2014.
I'm
So,
sorry
you
if
know,
I misspoke, that's
yeah.
true.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
looking at it, it's January 4th, 2019, I
Thank you.
apologize.
Alder Watson.
So that was my question, because I was sort of under the impression it was discovered shortly after the development agreement was, expired, and then people told to hold off on that.
Well, the development agreement doesn't expire. Their period during which they had to acquire the 200 jobs or establish those was a 5-year period, which ran from 2012 to 2017.
Okay.
So by the end of 2018, we knew they hadn't met that requirement. We were already talking about it, kicking it around as a staff. They said, what are our legal options? What can we do, given, the agreement and the way it's drafted, and what are our options? And I collaborated with outside counsel, and we did some research, and we put together a draft demand letter that we were told not to send. I kept saying, can we get this out? And Chris said, no, give me some more time to talk to these people, and that is really all I know. That is all I was told. So it was never sent.
Thank you. So,
Lou Larson has a comment.
I'm sorry?
Lou Larson also has his hand up.
Who does?
Lou Larson?
Larson?
Oh, I'm sorry, Alder Larson, I didn't notice you had your hand up. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just basically here to educate myself on this here. What I found very troubling was yesterday, as I heard earlier Alder Rasmussen say that this is not Mr. Fitzgerald's error, that this is obviously before his time. But what I found troubling last night was when I read in the Wausau Pilot Review that Fitzgerald is recommending the city waive the remaining commitment for CGI. And I'm kind of got troubled with the fact that why is he recommending this without without ED blessing or city council blessing? And I also wanted to just point out that it also, as being a member of the public, it puts out a message that you're recommending a cover-up. Thank you.
Sure, go ahead, Sean.
Alder Larson, that article in the blog was inaccurate, not factual, and irresponsible. If you read the staff memo, it indicates that staff is recommending that, and that was a collection of staff members that have been involved in helping to investigate this conversation over the last couple of months.
That's not how it was wrote in the Wausau
I understand, it's inaccurate and unfactual.
Mayor, I see you looking this way. Do you have something to say?
I want to encourage us to have a discussion about the topic, and maybe we can talk later about what appears in the media. I don't really feel comfortable putting staff on that spot right here. So if we'd like to have a conversation about that later, that's fine. But this is not the right time.
Thank you. I was going to say, and Alder Rasmussen is next up in the queue here. Just want to state again, you know, I find the language of that document horrific. It does not provide a firm foundation for us to act, other than perhaps to go and try to gain somewhere in the area of maybe $41,000, maybe even $21,000. Because one could say, looking at that document, that for 5 years, the company stayed in Wausau. 20%, 5 times, I'm sorry. That chops $100,000 or $200,000 right off the table. It's in the language. I think it's horrible. So, I mean, at some point, you know, we have a motion on the floor to try and recoup $241,000 full bore. And at some point, we're going to have to vote on that. But I'm just trying to lay it out there that that's a mighty high bar to set. And going to have trouble reaching it. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I'm starting to wonder if this isn't something where we need to really formulate a potential legal strategy in closed session, because we cannot develop a strategy if there's a legal case pending or about to come in open session on the floor with the other side's representatives on WebEx. I don't think that's appropriate, and I don't think it's strategic. You know, I also wonder where in the world the follow-up was from the other entities. Where was the follow-up from WEDC? How many loans did WEDC make over the years that gave out huge amounts of money with no follow-up, and people didn't hold up their end of the bargain? And here's another example. And, you know, it wasn't just us. It's them. It's McDevco. It's all of our partners, all of our development partners, when this came up short. And I guess Chris is lucky he's not here tonight. I would have so many things to say to him after he knew and directed the attorney to not send out the letter, and then completely failed to notify us as a committee and directed. We direct when those letters get sent out. We direct when collections start. We direct when agreements get revised. And that was denied to us by a former employee. I am really upset about this whole thing, and I really think that, you know, what we can collect and how, we need to hash that out in closed session. I would like to see us defer action tonight on this, put it on the agenda for our next meeting, or a special ED meeting, where we can come together in closed session, where we can have a real conversation with Ann.
Are you rescinding your second?
Yes.
Is there anybody else that wants to offer a second to the original motion?
May I clarify the motion,
I-
Mr. Chair, because it was not stated accurately. The motion is not to collect $241,000. I made a motion to fully enforce the agreement, including the jobs requirement. That is the motion. It does not quantify anything. It does not dive into legal strategy. So the motion is to fully enforce the agreement at hand, including the jobs requirement. Thank you. And I have my hand up for a comment.
I don't feel like we're to that point, so I'm still not going to second that. I want to talk with Ann first in a legal consult type setting.
Okay. Again, is there a second to that motion as clarified by Alder Killian? Going once, going twice. Is there a second? Seeing no second, I say we table this and, consider it in a separate meeting. And after, further consultation with council. Okay, thank you. Next item, number 3, discussion and possible action on the development proposals received for the River Life North Zone RFP. Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Alderman Neal. In January, this Economic Development Committee had submitted or approved the release of a request for proposal for 3 parcels in the North River Life Zone, we're calling it. That's the area north of Stinchfield Creek, south of the Wow restaurant development. That RFP went out. We had 2 responses that came back by the deadline in the middle of March. I'm going to just give a brief overview of those proposals, and then the developers that presented each of those proposals are with us tonight. I don't know if it's appropriate or kind of protocol to allow them to come up and give a presentation, but Shannon can show those on the screen here. The first proposal came in from the Vagut OD Riveron Group. They are a Wausau-based developer that also developed the apartments at River Life, down in the River Life area. Their proposal is for an $8 million facility that would be a 3-story mixed-use development that takes up Lot 6 and a portion of Lot 7. Would include 39 market-rate apartments, 39 underground spaces, and a portion of the first floor would be multi-tenant commercial space. The group is proposing to purchase that land for $165,000, and they are requesting $688,000 in city assistance through the Tax Incremental Finance District 12. Estimated value of annual property taxes collected based on that construction, and the 2020 tax rate would be $2,001 per year. The developer, Mitch Vagut, is with us here today and can come up in a moment. The second proposal that came in was from T. Wall Enterprises, is a Middleton-based developer. They are proposing a $24.9 million project that includes 3 buildings, each 4 stories per building, on all 3 lots that are in the area. The entire project is for 123 market-rate apartments, 82 underground parking spaces, and roughly 2,300 square feet of first-floor commercial space in each building. This group is proposing to purchase the land in that area for $400,000, and they're requesting a little bit over $2.5 million in tax incremental finance assistance from the city. Estimated annual property taxes using the same estimate as the first proposal would be about $580,000 per year based on the 2020 tax rate.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Hello, Mr. Vagut.
Hello,
Welcome.
welcome.
What do you have to say for
All
us
right.
tonight?
Well, for those of you that aren't familiar, well, I'm Mitch Vagut. I live in Wausau. I'm in Tom Killian's district. I live on Franklin Street here, one of the development partners of the River Life Phase 1. And Bob Odie and Dr. Riveron are my partners. Bob Odie is the current builder of the River Life Project 1. He's also a Wausau resident. He's the owner of REO Construction. He's a Wausau West graduate. He's currently working on the Pabst development for the apartments down by the Fiserv. And he's been a great builder. We completed our Phase 1 in 10 months. I think it was something like that from start to finish. My other partner is Fritz Riveron, the heart surgeon from Aspirus, very community-minded person in this area. You know, I just want to reiterate, we are Wausau people in that we're very committed to the river life and the Wausau development down here. My wife and I, we walk down there basically every day. Love it and love the way it's proceeded. We're hoping we can move forward with the third phase of this. We are currently starting the second phase, the condo development to the north. We'll be breaking ground this summer, and the plans are pretty much finalized with that. A year ago, about today, we were presenting on the building as it was with an office building, but due to coronavirus and the real estate market has completely changed. Basically, office space is not that much viable anymore. We all know restaurant owners and everybody else. And we see this trend continuing. So our proposal is for 39 apartments because we want to keep the view of the River Life area kind of unique and boutique-y. And we want to add about six commercial space. We'd like to add a coffee shop because it's like every time I'm walking down there, people are like, oh, it'd be great to stop for a cup of coffee. And we think like a service-based businesses down there where you can get your hair cut and a small restaurant and in that order. So I kind of want to explain to you guys why we think this is the right mix in size. Today, Swiderski's units on Urban West are not full. And Lockreed's new building on 17th Avenue is about 50% full. And that's kind of why we chose to keep this as a smaller 39 unit with one level of parking, because we feel that would be the right size for a better asset for the community versus just being investor driven. We kind of feel if we would have submitted a plan with 200 or 300 apartments, we had the wherewithal to do it, but we didn't feel that would be the right mix down there because we feel if this area gets overbuilt, our River Life is a real quality area. So our apartments, as you can attest to it, right? Every day I get feedback that people really like the apartments down there, and I think there'll be a main, when something is built down there, I think it will fill up. My problem, if a bigger building down there, and why we chose 39 and that, is if we overbuild, I'm worried that we're going to see half-empty apartments all over Wausau, and possibly in foreclosure or whatever, we might have a ripple effect. The other thing is we have the mall coming on with, Chuck is here tonight, so how many units were you guys planning on building, or in the plan, was it?
Well, in the plan right now, there's two buildings that each have 103 units. In general, some of the strategic plans relative to the Wausau strategic plan for growth, the comprehensive plan, however, which does call for the ability to probably have 1,300 units in the downtown area over a period of time. So I've remarked on those projections a number of times in the council.
Right. Mr. Egan, since the microphone wouldn't pick that up either, if you could paraphrase.
Yeah, what Chuck was saying was that, or Mr. Godorzi was saying that, well, maybe you can.
So anyway, relative to the downtown development, there's a Block 4 and a Block 5. Those each have 103 units in it as it's designed right now. There's also room on the Pennies structure for additional apartments depending on how that evolves. My comment to the number of units would simply to go back on things that I've said before council before, and that is, if you look at the Neighborhood Partners Plan, and if you look at our comprehensive plan of 2017, it does call for the fact that we do want to generate somewhere around 1,200 units, and that's what the consultants were saying at that time. So, Mitch, I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, so, my point is we were thinking that with the overall cosmetic look of River Life, we have the 4-story apartment. We would really think a 3-story with a small commercial on wouldn't congest the parking down there or anything else. I mean, we feel we aren't a Chicago, a Madison, a Milwaukee, where we have huge density needs down at the River Life area. I think as a community, we all like to use it as a workable, walkable space in kind of a semi-urban environment. And yeah, like I was thinking people that in Wausau don't really like structural parking. That was the other reason we wanted to present just enough parking underneath that we could have enough spaces for our 39 apartments plus the retail in the area so that it would limit it there. Because people in Wausau don't like to drive, people drive around the mall 5 times looking for, they don't want to park in a parking structure. I think it's something our community and our area doesn't necessarily support. But basically, once again, we're a team of credible investors and builders that have a good community vision, we feel, for the river life in this property, and we would hope we could continue with the success that we started with phase 1 of the project.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Any questions or?
Any questions from the committee?
Just one, do you anticipate, Mr. Vigut, then this would be the final phase of development
Well, I
for
think
your
there's
group down
another, there would be another lot in between WOW and this building.
Correct.
Just a smaller lot. Our vision on that smaller lot is like a paddle shop or something like that. We see it as like a 2,000 square foot retail in that area. Basically, if you go down there on a Friday night and you see the parking lot with WOW, I don't know if you've ever, it's pretty full down there already. So I don't know if we're going to get much more than another 2,000 square foot building, we were thinking, in that final lot that would be between WOW and
Okay.
our
And
proposed building.
your phase 2 condo project is breaking ground then this spring?
Yes, yeah, we have
Okay.
everything's going forward. The condo project is
Okay, thank you.
going great. Any other questions?
I'm not seeing any hands up. I do. Alder Killian has his hand up. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick question. On the city involvement with kind of the subsidy that you've laid out in your proposal, could you just give some more detail on that and what you'd be leveraging that for?
Yeah, basically, we aren't looking at any money up front, so the taxpayer doesn't have to give us any money. It'll only come off, it'll be a reverse TIF off our property taxes we'll be paying in the future. The main cost is the geopiers are going to cost us $200,000 or $300,000 at a minimum to get, because it's basically dump material what's on there. The ground is completely porous and very environmentally unsound. So as you know, Mr. Killian, in your district, what you deal with when you have some environmental issues. And then there are extra costs for bringing in the correct black dirt, the capping of the whole thing. And we expect that to exceed over $500,000, $600,000. If that clears it up, basically what we're looking for.
It does, and I thought it may relate somewhat to the geopiers and the environmental conditions, and that sounds very reasonable. Thank you for the information.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? No.
Thank you, Mr. Vigut. Sean, do we have?
I neglected to say at the end of, when I was describing the T-wall project, Terrence Wall, I believe I saw him on
Yeah, I
WebEx
see his name
earlier, is with us via WebEx tonight and is available to discuss and answer any questions about their project as well. Mr. Wall, do you want to give a brief introduction and presentation of your proposal?
Sure, thank you.
Welcome.
Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Sean? Great. Thanks for having us on tonight. I'm Terrence Wall with T-Wall Enterprises in Madison. As far as background, I've developed almost $750 million of real estate, the largest office portfolio in the state of Wisconsin, 5 retail centers, industrial park, and thousands of units of apartments. We specialize in going into towns and redeveloping, revitalizing their downtowns and their city centers. That's really our box that we love to develop within. We love going into the city center and finding sites along rivers or waterfront or parks. We've even gone to the point of actually creating town squares in cities to create an event center for them so they can bring in events and do programming. We have helped completely turn around downtown Green Bay, and former Mayor Jim Schmidt will probably be happy to tell you that. We took a site built in the 70s in downtown Middleton, assessed it $4.5 million, and have just completed our last building here over a 5-year period, and that value will be over $65 million for the same property in assessed value, bringing in 220 units, some retail, some office, completely turned around the downtown in Middleton. We're 58% of the downtown assessed value. I'm the #1 taxpayer in the city of Middleton. So we specialize in exactly this sort of development. We love doing this. We love seeing people, walking the streets and riding their bikes, and kids out and people out on Friday and Saturday night. We want to activate the riverfront, activate the street. We have an approach that is based on many years of experience in exactly this product and this location type. The key here is to have enough scale, because you can't, if you want to bring in new stores and restaurants, if you want to revitalize your city center, you got to have enough heads in beds, we always say. So heads in beds is what counts, getting enough people to live downtown and to bring disposable income downtown, where they'll shop, they'll buy coffee, they'll eat at restaurants. That is the key. And in order to do that, you have to have enough scale. You've got to have enough units to attract people. So it's not just one building, but it's a series of buildings. They see it as a community rather than a single freestanding building isolated by itself. A whole community. They see they're part of, they're part of a new and exciting lifestyle downtown. Wausau is almost 40,000 people. That's like, just to give an example, that's twice the size of Middleton, for example. And in Middleton, we've built, probably, many, somewhere under 1,000 units, but, and there's been some other developers who've built units. But to be honest, I really think that this is the start of something, I think, very special towards helping to change the momentum and the direction to continue to develop beyond this, beyond these 3 buildings. We'd like to do more along the riverfront and continue. We want to have at least 125 units to start, for economies of scale. We want to be able to put a full-time property manager and leasing agent, full-time maintenance person on site, living there, and we need about 125 to 150 units to do that. And then we'd like to continue to improve your city center and continue to develop along the river. We've got to bring in the disposable incomes. About 50% of our residents are under age 30, and the other 50% typically are 30 to 72. Many residents might be selling a home, and senior citizens or empty nesters, but they still want to maintain an active lifestyle. They're going to move in to our units. Give you an example, in City Deck in downtown Green Bay, we have one vice president of every medical group. We have one vice president of every banking group. We have 4 sportscasters, including the Packers sportscaster. So we brought in some really good residents who spend money downtown, and that's the real key of the whole thing. And then we do events on our open space. We have included some commercial space here. It might be a coffee shop, we don't know yet. We do look to attract the right type of commercial user. We don't just take, the first thing that comes along. We want to find the right thing that's going to help bring more people onto the riverfront and the walkways. So it's an exciting plan. I think it's very doable. We've got underground parking. I also want to point out that our buildings are of the highest quality. We do wide hallways. We don't do 4-foot hallways. We do 5 and 6-foot wide hallways. Our buildings have 1 foot of additional height inside every floor. So when you walk in, it's a really nice quality. Every wall is insulated for sound. We use extra thick luxury vinyl planking. We put in the glass stovetop, the faucet sprayers, the ice makers, things that, other developers just don't do. High quality, sustainable materials on the outside. We've got solid surfaces on the countertops. walk-through closets, laundry in every unit. We'll typically do studios, 1-bedrooms and 2-bedrooms. Sometimes, as we see demand for a 3-bedroom, we might include some of those down the road. The building type is going to last, 200 years. It's really high quality because we want to maintain a low maintenance cost because we want to own long-term. We're long-term holders. We don't, like a lot of developers, we don't come in, develop, flip, and, sell and get out. We're part of your community. Our staff will live there. They'll be out picking up litter out in front on the public property. They'll be helping to maintain the neighborhood. They'll get involved in the neighborhood. So it's a whole approach that we have. It's been very successful in other communities. We've developed in pioneering areas like Park Street in Madison where nobody believed it could be done, and we went in and built 65 units to start. Now we just finished last year 172 unit buildings, so we've got over 237 units in an area where no one said you could develop. And now there's 4 or 5 other development projects going on. Probably $500 million of redevelopment of that neighborhood that would never have happened if we hadn't gone in there. Neenah, we're now building in Neenah along the new park that they're building there. We're going to have a master plan for Neenah with 4 more buildings to help drive new development and people living there with disposable incomes that'll help sustain their downtown. In Middleton, we actually bought 4 old homes and tore them down and built a town square. And the city is now going to improve that. It's going to be a public space and going to have hundreds of events there. So it's just, it's a whole approach that we take, and we're very excited to be here, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have for us.
Appreciate your information. Thank you. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. Just a couple questions on the proposal. Obviously, it's clear that unlike the areas in Madison where T-Wall has developed, River Life is not an area where people think things are impossible. I mean, obviously, with the growth that we've seen in the area is highly developed, and it's got some momentum now, and I feel that, those developers that are coming to the table now with new projects are certainly undertaking less risks than the first couple did. Not only is the area desirable, but it's been a proven commodity as far as its ability to lease up for new units. So with that, I have a question, I guess, about the amount of TID incentive that's being requested on this project. And I see in the proposal, it's 10% or 65% of the available increment, whichever is greater. And my question would be, how did you arrive at that amount? Is that just an arbitrary amount that, that you're looking for to make your project cash flow, or are there defined expenses in association with the project that will cost $2.5 million plus?
Yes, that's an excellent question. So typically, we actually secure somewhere between 15 and 18% of project cost with TIP, and we usually get free land, to be honest with you. And that comes to about 90 to 100% of increment for TIP. That's what we always have gotten in other locations. In this location, we're taking less. We're hoping there'll be some, so far based on current investigations, less cost, but it is on a river. So there's going to be pilings, there's going to be a bathtub effect that we have to create a bathtub to keep the water out of the bathtub. That means a special construction, that means dewatering during construction, it means drain tiles, pumps, backup generators. Anytime you're on a low area, you're along a riverfront or river or any kind of waterfront, you're looking at some additional costs for construction. Underground parking is very expensive. It's at least $25,000 per parking space. So you've got some extraordinary costs when you develop in an area like this, on land like this. You never really know for sure until you get in there and start digging the hole exactly what you're going to run into. We'll do a grid pattern of borings, solar borings, but even then, you know, in Green Bay, just to give you an example, we did a very thorough investigation. We did a grid pattern of borings, and yet we still missed an underground concrete vault. We missed a bridge abutment that had been abandoned. You know, in the center of cities, you know, where the city's been around for a long, long time, you know, there's stuff there that people don't realize, right? It's buried, it's abandoned. You're going to run into extraordinary costs. So this amount of TIF is actually on the very, very low end to make this doable. It's actually a very small amount of TIF given the value that we're creating. In addition, this is developer finance TIF, so we're taking the risk. We have to go get the loan, and we've got to sign on that. So it's not a TIF grant directly from the city up front. We have to go secure the capital, and then obviously it's paid back over time from the TIF payments of the property taxes. So yes, there are extraordinary costs involved in sites like these, and you never know really what you're going to run into. But we are building higher quality, and I'll give you an example. In Green Bay, you know, we developed, and then the city did a deal with another developer, and they started digging their hole along the Fox River, and I drove by and I commented to my staff, I'm like, well, that's going to be a swimming pool, you know, and a week later it was a swimming pool, 20 feet deep. You know, it had not even dawned on the contractor or the developer to, you know, that when you dig on a site like this, you're going in below the water table. You know, the site could collapse in from the riverfront. You have to take extraordinary measures. You have got to do shoring of your excavation sites to make sure it doesn't collapse in. And depending on the soils, you know, sometimes the soils are high-risk soils, sometimes they're less risky soils. So, you know, you've got to plan for that to make sure you don't have a disaster on your hands. But we, give you an example, in Middleton a few years ago, we had 15 inches of rainfall in, I don't know, like 4 hours, and huge sections of the city were underwater 4 and 5, 6 feet deep. Costco's parking lot was so deep the customers had to sleep overnight in the Costco store. They couldn't leave. Cars were floating away in garages, and yet our garages in our buildings were completely dry. No problem. We didn't have any flooding, even though we were below the flood line. And that's because we invest the extra capital to ensure that these buildings stand, you know, for generations without any problems. So yeah, it's high risk, and this amount of TIF is very low amount for the additional, what we call extraordinary expenditures that will be necessary for this particular site.
Thank you. Alder Killian has his hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I want to say thank you to both groups because it's really refreshing to receive multiple solid, well thought out proposals on an RFP, and I think they both look great. You know, with the history of river life, you know, to say that earlier it had a troubled face, I think that would be a euphemistic understatement there. And you know, on that note, I think you know, with the last river life development, the group was able to pick up a troubled effort and really do something solid with it, and it has a good track record in that way, and that certainly doesn't detract from your proposal, Mr. Wall and company. But I think with that track record and the scale, and also the level of subsidy, and you know, this committee has talked about those geo-piers and some of the environmental conditions on that riverfront before. I think the level of involvement or city participation we heard earlier in regard to those elements is reasonable and makes sense. So, well, I think both of these proposals are fantastic. I'm going to be supporting the Vigut Odi Riveron proposal tonight, and I would make a motion for its selection. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say, before I entertain a second on that motion, that I was probably expecting tonight to be our first pass at both of these because there are certain details involved that we're not, seeing. More detailed, any renderings of the actual proposed buildings. Just a level that we are not seeing yet, and I don't think we're at a point. I have, concerns about, hammering out some of the mechanics of the TIF financing and, how that will be, played out over time. So I'm thinking that, while I would have to entertain a second if there is one, my feeling is that this would have been our first pass at both so that we can see a more refined presentation from both before we entertain choosing one over the other. That being said, there is a motion on the floor.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, without interrupting, may I clarify why I've also made that motion this evening? In the packet with the staff memo, one of the reasons this was put forth according to the memo was for such a selection. So pardon me if it was perhaps premature this evening, but it was made in accordance with the contents of the memo and the packet. Thank you.
No, not at all. I mean, you have every right to make a motion. I'm just, stating my feelings. I think that maybe it might be early, but if you have a right to do it, Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I too, I guess, was surprised to see that we were asked to make a selection tonight on the first pass based on the wording of the agenda and the fact that we didn't have closed session posted to hash out the incentives. Because we normally have the developer present in open session, and then we have those discussion amongst ourselves in closed session, and then we decide what we want to do moving forward. And, I also would like to see at least a preliminary design rendering of both projects. And, I do feel that we're lacking that here. Right now, we're seeing the overhead view in the packet. I would like to see what that building looks like standing among the rest of what's down there. And I need to know a little more. I mean, it's, there's a substantial difference in the TID ask. And I agree with Alder Killian that there's a serious value to be put on experience because the way we went awry on the first pass of River Life is because we put all of our eggs into the basket of an unproven commodity because we had big dreams for that area on the first project, and it didn't pan out. And so I want us to proceed cautiously, and I think we need to know a little more, and we need to see those renderings. So if we're planning to do a special session where we can talk about collaborative, I would also like us to include these renderings in that session if we could.
Thank you. I also would hope that, prior to, asking for a second and going forward in that discussion, there's a variety of things that, maybe it'd be great feedback from our committee to both proposers regarding what's on our little wish list as a committee. We've done this in the past with projects down there and elsewhere in the city. One of the things, a salient consideration for the River Life area has always been, before anything happened down there, was to try to create a mix of a place where somebody can live and recreate, but also where general public can walk through and participate and not feel like they're trespassing. So, I look at something like the overview for the wall presentation, and I do see a common area by the two commercial spaces, but I'd be looking at things like, what about a promenade, coming from the east, sort of an alleyway to, for foot traffic that way, or, that sort of thing. General public engagement is something that we'd sure like to see from either of the proposers going forward. And that's why we really like to see that second pass before we get to, the decision-making stage of the game. So that being said, anyways, any other comments from the committee?
Would it be possible for the developers to have at least a draft rendering prepared for us for our next meeting? Ordinarily, we would meet the first Tuesday of April, which is way too fast, but, if we would, our backup date always has been the third Thursday. if we would look at the third Thursday of April, would those proposers both be able to prepare, what it looks like a three-dimensional sketch of the buildings?
Gentlemen?
Mitch is nodding.
Yeah, absolutely. If you saw with our condo project, how we had the three dimensions.
Yes,
we
that
could-
was
we
super
could-
helpful.
Yeah, we could present something like that, absolutely.
That's kind of what I'm looking for.
Okay, Mr. Wall?
Sure, no problem. One of the things that's pointed out on the public engagement in our city deck development in Green Bay, we actually have 100,000 people that go up our stairs to link between city deck and the bridge where the 4th of July celebration is held every year. So we're very much about getting the public in, right? Because they could be residents someday too. But you want to get the events going, you want to have all kinds of activities down here.
Very good. Alder McElhenney?
Mr. Chair, pardon me, just point of inquiry or order. There was a motion. Was it ever asked for a second? If it dies, it dies, but for the sake of procedure, I do not know if a second was ever called.
But there will be a call for a second. I have not seen a second yet. Alder McElhenney, your hand is up.
Thank you. I just want to echo Alder Neal's comments. I had my hand up while he was speaking, didn't know what he was speaking, but I too, I am going to be looking for a project that does exactly what Alder Neal said. I have had a lot of feedback from my residents over the years that they hope the riverfront would be something for the public as much as just condos. And so I do see some of that. I have that in front of me right now of the public walkway and, other things. That is important to my residents. It's not just putting up, a place and that we have some kind of a building there, but that they can interact in that riverfront. They are residents of this city, they pay taxes, and that riverfront is precious, and they want to be involved in that. So I hope, I am not ready to make any selection tonight, and I want to give both proposers as much time as they can, but that is my feeling, and that is what I am looking for is, I want to see some great buildings, but I also want to see some great ideas. I want to see something where we can interact, as a community and on our beautiful riverfront that we have paid so dearly for a long time in cleaning it up. So I hope that we give you as much time as you need in thinking through these comments, and that I am looking forward to seeing your ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. All right, before I ask for a second, Alder Killian, I just want to make sure, having heard what you've heard so far, do you still wish to have your motion on the floor?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second to Alder Killian's motion? Is there a second? I'm not seeing one. I'm assuming the committee, for the most part, is looking forward to that second pass with refined presentations. Okay, thank you. And thank you, gentlemen, for joining us tonight and giving us your ear and your words. I appreciate it.
I just want to add that, this is my first time since I've been with the city receiving a proposal where we've had competitive bids. So the recommendation for making a decision tonight, I didn't realize there was kind of a protocol and established process, and I apologize. I guess the emphasis in putting that in the memo wasn't so much to force a decision as it was to point out that terms of the term sheet that you would typically get and evaluate is not prepared, obviously, at this point, and that would come later down the road. But staff is certainly happy to continue engaging with both developers to acquire more information and bring this back to the committee at a later date.
All right, thank you. Alder Watson, go ahead.
So will this be brought back in April, as Alder Rasmussen mentioned, our third Thursday, or even later than that? What's the plan?
Our next regularly scheduled meeting?
We're still in March, but
Yes, but you were talking about
I was talking about the
a
third
later
Thursday.
date, so not to rush that.
Right, the third Thursday of April will be it's always our backup day. We don't do these two meetings in a month, which is the 15th. The 15th of April is the third Thursday. That's just always the day that we used as a backup. If we couldn't get something in time for, I mean, our ordinary April meeting would have been the 6th. And since we're here on the 31st, my assumption is that we weren't going to meet on the 6th.
Okay.
But we also have we have 5 Thursdays in April. So we certainly could pick something that works, you know, whether it's the 15th, which seems early, maybe the 22nd, give everyone an extra week. You know, if they need to engage with their architects.
I would love to argue for the 22nd, just because we have a transit commission meeting on the 15th in this right here.
I'm good with that.
There you
If
go.
we can get a quorum, I'm not pressing for the 15th. I just thought we'd
Sure.
try to get these
All right,
folks
well,
some
let's look at the
answers sooner than
22nd
later.
then.
Okay.
Very good, thank you. Appreciate everybody's participation. Number 4, discussion and possible action on the developer request to amend the Thomas Street Remnant Parcel single-family housing proposal. Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Alderman Neal. This matter is something that you've all seen before. You saw as a council, as an entire council, at its last meeting, I believe, earlier in March. There had been an award of the proposal to Tyler Knutson Construction for the development of 6 single-family homes on the 6 parcels that the city owns. The developer had come back to the city, to staff, to ask about acquiring the properties one at a time. That had been brought before the council at its last meeting, and the council made the decision to bring this back to Economic Development Committee to discuss further. The developer, Tyler Knutson, and Keith Sampika with Tyler Knutson Construction are here tonight and available to answer any questions. I know in conversations that we've had in the weeks since, you know, they've evaluated, I know there's been suggestions from the council about possibly having a different style of house that might be more affordable. They've talked about, you know, what possibilities might surround them submitting plans in that regard. I know they have some additional requests I think they may make tonight as well. So I guess I just want to point out that they're here for any questions, and if we want to give them an opportunity to address the committee, I'll allow you to do that now.
Okay. Well, I guess originally we had, a 3-phase construction plan, 2 at a time? And now are we looking at a proposed 1 at a time? And this is like sort of lender-driven?
Yeah, so basically, I mean, the issue that we ran into is that our banker didn't get prior board approval, which he needed to do until the last minute. So essentially what we came across is that we need to adjust because, I mean, it wasn't on our end, it was our banker who just kind of failed to follow through with that. And I mean, looking back to when we started all of this, I mean, we came in, we offered above what was asked. I mean, it was asked for $6,500 per lot. We offered $7,500. We came to every meeting, we spent all the time, we had blueprints exactly of what was asked for us. And we've taken a lot of heat from this committee, from certain members who go to the press or go on their own accord on Facebook and things like that and bring up allegations of contamination and things like that, when we've seen the reports from the DNR ourselves, which say that there is in fact no contamination, there's no further testing required, everything is within the state required limits. And so we're sitting here where we kind of have an experience where we're taking heat from this and we come back with just one little minor request and then it gets shut down. Where I think, like, a bit of an analogy I could say here is if we were to compare this as if I were to go out to eat and I go and I pay for my food, I give a tip in advance, and right as my food's being brought out to me, someone spits in it right in front of me. And that's what it feels like as we've taken heat. We have clients that are existing clients that have come to us, you know, asking us about, you know, why are you doing this when there's contamination? When all it is just allegations that are being spread around. It's not true, it's the media, it's everything like that. And where we're sitting with it, it's almost like, well, we can sit here and we can try and wash the spit off of our food that we have, or we could almost just go to a different restaurant. And I mean, it's not a complete perfect analogy, but it's kind of our stance. I mean, we could try and work something out and see how it goes, but honestly, where we stand, we're okay with just walking away.
That's pretty graphic analogy. Well, you know, you have experienced support from this committee, and I guess you've also experienced some pushback. You know, and for what it's worth, I'm not, you know, characterizing the pushback as, warranted or not. I guess, you know, the committee has to look at, you know, initially we had a proposal, you know, that was, like I said, like a three-pronged or three-phased, two at a time sort of thing over a period of years. And, you know, is that a concern to us as a committee that this would now be like basically a house at a time? So that's one thing. You know, if that, you know, if we find that that's insurmountable, then we'd be right back to going out for RFP. We've done the RFP process and seen how that has panned out in terms of interest. So I'd like to have a discussion here on our committee about, is there throwing a baby out with bathwater here? Is there, taking a bird in the hand? That sort of thing. We have to have that kind of discussion on the relative merits, from an economic development standpoint. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I'm glad that we have this back in this committee, rather than to try to hash this out on the council floor a few weeks ago. I think this is the appropriate realm to discuss development and project changes. That said, we selected the development that was offered by Mr. Knudsen. We could have just said, nope, we don't want any of them. We're not obligated when we do an RFP, whether you get one response or 5, to take any of them. Doing nothing is certainly an option for this committee. We chose the proposal they brought us because we liked the look. We liked what they were offering. And, at the end of the day, at least I, as a committee member, am not of the mind that all of this land has to be developed immediately. What is our hurry? We took homes down, we put the road in, we put the sidewalk in, and if it takes a couple extra years to develop all of the lots, in my mind, that's not a loss for us. And so, if you're getting a quality product, even if you build them one at a time, if it takes an extra year or two, that is not the end of the world. And I think that we have the capacity to work with them. It's not that we need that development to happen all at once or, immediately. But I also wonder, with all of the, they mentioned the comments that have been made either in, televised meetings or on social media. Obviously people can say whatever they want to say, but has that damaged the market for their end product now? Has that dialogue created fear in the real estate market that really is going to cause a negative outcome for them? And, if that's the case, and their bank's interest and their interest in building one home at a time, it sounds to me like the first one is kind of a test. Build the first one, and if that sells, then we're down with the rest. Well, if we want to see that happen, facts are facts. We know what the geology says out there. We've tested, we know what's going on out there. We should not, in good faith, ask these folks to start a project and undertake a project and then consciously work to pull the rug out from under the market for it. I think that is just not right. And so, I hope that the marketplace in that area is not damaged, because everything that we've seen from the DNR indicates that you should be able to safely build on those properties. We stipulated that they should not have basements out of an abundance of caution. So there shouldn't be anything wrong with building on those sites. And I think to create fear in the marketplace isn't fair to anyone who would want to build or buy a home in that area. So I'm okay with doing this slower. But I also don't want to see us renegotiate, make a different deal with Mr. Knudsen, and then undermine them every day of the week, every time somebody asks a question about it. So I guess we need to decide where we come down. Where are we going to be as a committee and as a unit of government that's going to, sell off this land? Now, realistically, we asked them to buy the lots and build. They didn't ask for city money, they didn't ask for TID assistance. The process is really no different than if we had stuck a real estate sign out there and just let the lots go. And once you sell the lots, it's their project, it's their business. And if we're not investing in that, it's out of our hands, and we would need to let it be out of our hands. So I'm apt to work with these gentlemen as a committee if we feel we can do that.
Are you making a motion, Alder?
Not yet, because I want to hear the rest of our discussion.
Okay, thank you.
I
Gentlemen,
will if we get to the point where
Sure.
we feel like we've talked it through.
You know, are you here really are you hopeful, seeking the support of this committee to go ahead?
I think we are, you know, I mean, I'm still committed to the project. There's a couple of variables that kind of came up now with pricing going, you know, continuing to rise on building materials. It's not really helping our case right now as far as the cost of the houses was predicted to be far less than what it's coming back at right now. And then you have kind of this mix of kind of fear being instilled by Facebooks and other media outlets that are also, I mean, that's not really a very positive outlook when it could be damaging our market, you know. So, I mean, we'll have an expensive house that's not very desirable is basically what we could potentially be up against, and that's not really attractive because I personally don't want to own 6 houses on Thomas Street, you know. I mean, I can't afford that. You know, we're just 2 guys living in town here, you know. I mean, they need to sell. We need to build these. We need a buyer. We need to sell them. Somebody needs to enjoy it. You know, that's our goal. And, you know, it's just the lender has kind of created this situation, and it was based on several factors. And, you know, it's just, we're kind of running into a wall. So, you know, if we can get some time and a little bit of flexibility, I'm all for it. I think it'd be a great project, and, you know, what we're looking towards is potentially having a springboard so that people recognize us more as a builder, you know, and we can start to try and kind of grow in that direction as a company.
Very good, thank you. Alder Killian has his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Mr. Fitzgerald on this. With the initial proposal, was it to buy all properties that were out there in the RFP? Was that to be purchased kind of at the front end?
That was what our understanding of their proposal was, and I think that was the intention of the committee when you put this RFP out.
Right, so just as a point of fact, it's not just building 2 at once or building 1 at a time. It's that the proposal was actually for all of the properties. And I guess, you know, with the way that the lender has gone, I don't think that it really doesn't inspire confidence for me as an alderperson of the district. As a second point of fact, Alder Larson at a prior meeting had conveyed that he had received an email from Mr. Matt Thompson at the DNR, who apparently had suggested kind of as an informal recommendation that whoever would have this property in the future may want to do a phase 1 and phase 2 to fully understand the history and current state of those properties. And so, while it may be new to some, it's certainly not new in District 3, this environmental history. And I'm not sure we're kind of, some of the vague assertions were coming from earlier, but I think tonight we should act with professional courtesy, whether it's to former staff, journalists, or other council members. So I think I would like to see the email from Mr. Matt Thompson at from the DNR that Alder Larson had referenced in an earlier meeting. I think that may be something pertinent to see based on those comments that were brought up. And, you know, I don't know about some of these social media assertions that have been reference, but I think District 3 has never asserted anything on environmental history that public records couldn't back up. So I think this is different than the proposal that was approved. I'm not hearing much confidence from the lender, much enthusiasm really from the developer. I don't think we're withdrawing an approval here because we never approved what's being presented to us tonight in terms of the property purchases or what's going to occur. I do have a concern it could result, if this isn't fruitful, this first one, it could result in a patchwork where then we try another development to see if that works and perhaps another next to that. And I think that guess and check approach is probably not in the best interest of the neighborhood of the district there. So when I say that, it means no disrespect. I'm simply looking out for those I represent. So thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Rasmussen?
Thank you. Knowing that we, based on feedback from the neighborhood, I mean, let's remind ourselves that we let a $7 million apartment complex get away on this site. So that said, gentlemen, if we are able to work with you in terms of an agreement to build one home at a time, would you be willing to acquire all 6 lots and then build them one at a time? Or do you want to buy one lot, then another lot, and then another lot?
Our preference would just be to buy one lot.
Purchase the first one, and I
Yeah.
believe that was the easternmost one? Was that what,
Yes, that's
based on the
correct.
council discussion? So we really wouldn't be into a weird patchwork approach because they're not building in the middle. You know, if you sell them one lot and they put up one house at the end, the rest of it contiguously is still available whether or not they're the developer. So what, I guess I need someone to explain to me what the risk would be of putting one nice house at the corner.
Well, Alder, I'll just say that, one person's patchwork is another person's, variety. Some people prefer a different look, within a neighborhood rather than everything looking uniform. So you could talk about either side of that argument forever. I have my views on it, but I'm not going to sit here and talk about the relative merits of patchwork versus uniform. Is there, though, a motion coming forward from the committee?
Perhaps, I guess the other question we should talk through then is, if we are interested in getting rid of all 6 lots at once, assuming that we would sell these gentlemen the lot that they want at the eastern end, would it be wise for us then to list the other 5 for sale with a realtor? Or hold them?
Gentlemen, if
I don't really want to sit on them for 6 years. I want
Sure.
some commitment.
If it turned out that, we okayed, you're, building that house at the east end, what would your reaction be if we say, yeah, but we're going to RFP for the other 5?
I think we'd be okay with that. I think, if I remember correctly, the original RFP at the bottom did state that there could be multiple RFPs that were sent in that were chosen and tied together. So, that was kind of our thought from the beginning, that we might only get 1 or 2 of the lots, and other people would build on the other ones, just to
Okay.
make it fair.
Very good. Thank you.
Then at this time, Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we sell the easternmost lot to Mr. Knutson and his firm, permit them to build their first house based on their original design, if that's amenable to them, and that we then list for sale the remaining 5 properties.
Thank you. Do I have a second in the committee? Looking for a second. Yes, Alder Watson.
I would second that.
Okay, I have a second from Watson. Further discussion on this? Alder Watson.
Do the remaining parcels, if we would put them up for sale, do they have to be homes? Or is there a way to rezone so we could have, some, because then that would avoid the contamination issue. You wouldn't have to worry about a person living there.
They could be anything. Obviously, the Plan Commission controls the zoning. But if someone wanted to put in a little shop, I mean, the obvious issue is where the access is there because the median is in front. So you can't get in from both directions for the most part in that block. So that's kind of a right in, right out type situation there. If you try to put in a business, it's not going to be easy. But, you know, that said, if it's something that dovetails with a neighborhood, that certainly would be a future discussion if someone wanted to buy a piece of land contingent upon being able to use it for their purpose. But, you know, my thought was that we would list them with a Realtor as
Like the fire
available
station.
lots and see if someone will buy them.
City Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lisa, do I understand your motion to mean that this isn't just a sale of one lot, that it is contingent upon them building the design that they proposed in their original proposal? In other words, these are going to be restrictions placed on the sale of the lot?
Are they redesigning the home? I mean,
I don't know, there was some confusion earlier about whether
There was a couple
there were
different
any
designs in the-
restrictions. The resolution was drafted to just sell the lots, but I saw in Sean's staff memo this time some reference to possible deed restrictions. So, I mean, it's open again for discussion. I
So-
just want to make sure I understand your motion.
we selected their proposal based on the renderings of what the project would look like. And they had a couple different designs contained within that first proposal. And so in terms of development and appeal, I feel that we could live with any of the designs they submitted in the original proposal. Whether they want to pick design A, B, or C really is up to them. But I think confined within the drawings that we saw originally. If it's going to be something vastly different, I think we would want to see that drawing first. So my motion would be that we sell them one lot, the easternmost lot that they requested, and that we request that they build one of the designs that was submitted in the original proposal, and that we then sell on the real estate market the other 5 lots.
Point of inquiry.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for the parliamentarian, are we within bounds on agendized items to pull that apart as such and just put those out for sale when this was really about possible amending of this specific developer's proposal? That seems to me it does not give the public enough sufficient information to know what was going to be discussed and taken action upon this evening. Thank you.
That's a good question. The agenda item says possible action on the developer's request to amend the Thomas Street Remnant Parcel single-family housing proposal. So I think it probably is limited to amending their proposal, but amending that proposal may be, since the last one was rescinded, we now want to amend it in a way that we want to just purchase one lot and build one house, and we're not going to make a commitment to purchase the other 5. So in my opinion, I think it is germane.
Okay, and that was the reason for my motion was based on the feedback we got from them during the conversation, was that they're most interested in securing the one lot that they've voiced interest in. And that the other ones, you know, if they're not concerned about losing those properties, then selling them makes sense for us as the owner.
And are you also saying that we can't say we would then sell those remaining 5 parcels, that we would have to hold that for another RFP?
No, I'm saying that that is germane to amending, and we're not really amending the original proposal per se because everything was rescinded. So everything's back on the table for tonight. It's open for discussion, but the way the agenda was worded, I think that's germane because it is, while we're not legally and technically amending their proposal, everything's on the table. That is sort of an amendment to their original proposal. We want one lot. We don't want all 6 of them. We're not going to commit to the rest. And you can disagree with me, but I think it's germane.
We are requesting that they dovetail with their original design projection as well. So
Right.
Alder Killian, your hand is still up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a comment prior to the point of inquiry. So I guess an amendment or friendly amendment to this would be to, amend the developer's proposal as it states on the agenda, but do not take immediate action on the other properties. I think, we kind of ran into some issues here by not taking our time on the proposal process. And there was a well-attended public participation meeting from it and for this, and what came out of it was a few things that they wanted to make sure that there were affordable single-family homes in the area, and also through public feedback that the properties, the environmental fitness was okay. So if this is going to be kind of sliced up tonight in one property purchased by the developer, if that's the amendment, okay, but I would ask that we kind of prudently work through the other 5 properties so we're not dismissing the large amount of public feedback we had, which I think was reasonable feedback. So I think we can separate those two and probably should. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Rasmussen.
I guess I would, with Connect, well then, assuming that's a request for me to amend the construction of my motion or the content of my motion, at the end of the day, I think the city needs to not own these properties anymore. The city needs to get out of the land ownership business. And so that's why I have it all coupled together. Sell them the piece they want, let them build the house they want. Then let the private sector dictate what the other 5 become. And I think that then opens them up to fair market proposals, and it takes us and the politics of the parcels out of the mix. If someone wants to buy a piece of land and build on it, let them. Because I think the longer we own it and the longer we keep requesting proposals, all we are doing is starting another series of fights with the neighborhood. So that's why I think we should sell this parcel for this nice-looking home. Let them try it. If it works and no one buys the other 5, they're welcome to come back and buy a couple more. We would like to have a couple more of the houses they've proposed, just not today. So, and that's not to say that they will fly off the market. They may sit for sale for 2 years. We don't know. But I'm reluctant to continue to hold action on the other 5 and retain them under city ownership, because the fact that the city is controlling what happens there is part of the angst in the neighborhood. So I'm proposing that we sell them off and let private individuals figure out what the future holds.
Thank you. Well put. Mr. Fitzgerald, you wanted to say something?
Oh, I was looking for some clarification earlier when you talked about listing them. And I did want to point out, one of the concerns from community development in terms of having the process we've had for an RFP before is that when they're out there on the open market and anybody can purchase them, and I know there has been some interest from parties in purchasing some of those lots there for the purpose of a parking lot. I don't, that isn't what community development necessarily wants to see there. I don't believe that's what the neighbors necessarily want to see in that area as well. And so we do want to just make sure that we have some ability to control the use on the sale, if we do list them through a broker type of a situation.
Doesn't the zoning dictate that? If those properties are zoned for residential right now?
I had some questions from Alderperson Watson about this earlier today, and unfortunately Brad Lenz is not available. I have to say, unfortunately, I can't answer the zoning questions as far as the specificity of what they'd control.
Okay.
Alder Peckham had his hand up first.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of hands up on WebEx. Before I go to those, Alder Rasmussen, do you see any merit in divorcing the mentions of the remaining 5 parcels from your motion and just strictly make the amendment relate to, the one in question, and then we look at, our various options for how we might want to handle disposing of the other 5?
Yeah, I guess if we can't come to consensus tonight about keeping it wrapped together and just being done with this, that's really what needs to happen, I think, is we just need to get out of this game. And so though as a committee, we cannot agree to that through our discussion, then I think at any rate, we need to sell the parcel they want. And soon, we need to take up a discussion of what to do with the other 5. And so if we can agree to do that, if we can agree to, within the next month or two, figure out what we're going to do to get rid of the other 5, I would amend my motion then to limit it to the sale of the easternmost parcel to the Knutsons.
Thank you. Did we have a second on that? Okay. Alder Peckham, your hand was up first.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate it. I'm liking the way the conversation is going, and this is kind of along the lines of what Alder Killian said, and I appreciate that Alder Rasmussen is cognizant, I guess, of the difference in the 5 lots. And one of the things that is possible to, I guess, bargain on or rethink is the requirement that for these other 5 lots, the requirement that the home be on a slab rather than have a basement.
Yes.
So if I were on that committee, I would be in favor of selling those other 5 lots to, any eligible buyer, and they can decide whether they want to put a basement under there or not. So that's my only thought.
I believe that would be part of our mechanics of going forward, even if we did go through the private sector, to have certain city commanded covenants, if you will, as to what can and cannot be done on the ground.
Can probably have deed restrictions or something.
Sure. Alder Killian, your hand is up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, Alder Peckham, I think, hit really many of the points that I wanted to hit in terms of divorcing these. And I think just moving forward separately in a prudent manner. And yes, we do have to be cautious on some of these parcels that are very close to remediation sites. It is a fact, not an opinion, that they sit on top of a groundwater plume, that has multiple contaminants. So that's a fact. And often the depth to groundwater in that area is what doesn't present a concern from my understanding from the DNR typically. But when the Public Works Department or city consultants associated with the department for the Thomas Street project had done some groundwater borings just within the past couple of years, they were surprised to find that farther east, they hit groundwater at only about 7 to 8 feet below surface. And I think part of that was because of high river, elevation at the time. But nevertheless, I think it's very good to proceed cautiously, and I think divorcing these is probably the best way. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just having my batteries getting low here. I kind of sort of have a problem here with the double standards of the neighborhood, because on one side of the railroad tracks, we've got, 1300 Cleveland Avenue, where we've got all kinds of contaminants and stuff, and we're still figuring out what to do. But on the other side, there's been construction and homes have been torn down there, but you're still right next to a government regulated site. And I have I can find that email I got from Matt Thompson from the DNR who suggests that a phase 1 and 2 survey be done or study be done on these before they are sold, and if we do go ahead and sell them, I guess without a phase 1 or phase 2, I would have to ask the legal department to draft something up where, in the event that people do get sick or something from building on these, they can't come back on the city in the future with any kind of lawsuits or anything. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion from the committee? Seeing none? Oh, Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you.
go
I
ahead.
think it bears recognition that the site that we're considering selling is over a block from the Waleco site. It is not the couple that are immediately adjacent to it. And so, I think that if the buyer wishes to conduct their own Phase 1 and Phase 2, they're absolutely welcome to do that. And in the original RFP, we did offer the fact that if there were environmental concerns, that, they were welcome to gather the information that we have on that and conduct their own testing. Now, they've indicated that they want to buy the properties and they want to build on them, and they're more concerned about the negative statements that have been made publicly, by members of our own body and the media and citizens than they are about testing Phase 1 and Phase 2. And I don't think that we are required or should be required to conduct testing at the taxpayer's expense to sell remnant parcels, which is what these are. I mean, we sold all the remnant parcels to the west, whether people like what's on them or not, and we were not required to disclose or test any of those. So at the end of the day, I think that we need to just put them up for sale, and, we need to not overthink this. It's remnant land for sale, end of story. And so my motion is to sell off the parcel they want at the east end, and then within our next few meetings, figure out what to do with the other 5. But, I think to attach unnecessary restrictions on them, they don't need it and we don't need it.
Thank you. Alder Killian, your hand is up again.
Yes, I am forced to, respond to one comment just to make sure that what's on the record is kind of factual. And I've been steeped in this information historically, for better or worse. And one reason that we did not really have to do the testing to the west, or it was not as intense a need to do so, was because I'll give you one reason that's on the record, and actually it's sitting in the Public Works Department. There's a long report by Stantec, who just happened to be a consultant for the city at times in the past, so Stantec's credibility is not in question by the city, obviously, given that fact. They documented years ago that there was confirmed dioxin contamination east of the S&E factory. And I believe that document, which can be acquired at the Marathon County Courthouse or from the DNR now, confirms that fact. So if there was any confusion as to why the land east of that factory was a concern, it's because a credible consultant, as well as others, had confirmed dioxin contamination east of the former S&E factory. So I just wanted to, in a respectful way, let our committee know that those are the facts of the matter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
That's 4-1. Thank you. Our last item on our agenda discussion, well, actually...
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, did you intend to send this then to the April 13th council meeting or April 27th? What's your pleasure, so we can let these gentlemen know?
Any reason to
I think
delay?
construction season is afoot already, so the
Yeah.
sooner the better.
Sure.
I mean, if they need to get going and mobilize their crew.
Sure. Okay.
So April 13th, this measure will be before council at 6:30.
I'll be in touch. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you,
gentlemen.
thank you.
Number 5, discussion and possible action on the release of a request for proposal for the redevelopment of the former West Side Battery property at 415 South First Avenue. Mr. Fitzgerald.
Okay, another item that many of you on the committee have seen a couple times in the past. We haven't actively been marketing the West Side Battery property. We have had a sign out there over the last 6 months. I have done a number of showings of 4 in the last 3 months here, a small handful in the latter part of 2020. There are some of those have evolved into more serious interest, and wanted to bring this back before the committee to discuss with the hope of putting out a request for proposal so that we might get those proposals to come to light for the committee to discuss further. I have prepared a draft of the request for proposal and presented that in the packet here. This is partially based on some of the previous RFPs that have gone out for that same property. There's also a few other additions in here, requesting specifics or specific proposals relative to a commercial space that welcomes visitors into the downtown area. Also, the evaluation criteria that are on here is that was not included in the most recent proposal. But I'm open to accepting any suggestions for modifying this, changing it, throwing it out all together and starting over, and then taking those suggestions and releasing the RFP.
Attorney Jacobson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to point out to this committee, because it will be a lease that'll eventually have to come back through committee and council for approval, and I don't know that you're all aware of this, but just yesterday I completed and was asked to prepare a lease for the engineering department for Zenith Tech, who will be doing the Scott Street Bridge overlay project this summer, for a lease of the West Side Battery property to use as a laydown yard to store all their large construction equipment and materials. So I noticed your draft proposal, Sean, or just set the proposals to come back in June and do something in July. The lease that Zenith Tech proposed, they want to start April 5th, and they want it to run through October 31st. And then they want it to automatically renew on a month-to-month basis, and then we have to give them 30 days advance notice before we can terminate that lease. And so that hasn't been approved yet, obviously, by council, but I don't know how that's going to mix in with your showing of the property, for instance, taking people on there when we're asking them to insure the premises as long as they're occupying it, and so on and so forth. So I hope those two things are compatible. If we're going to lease that lot to them, that you could still show it, and it'll still be appealing to people to put in proposals on it. Just wanted to make you aware of that.
And if somebody buys the property, then the lease would be transferable, but not deniable. I mean, is there verbiage that we can work up because we've committed to a certain time frame?
Yeah, we could put something in the lease.
Okay.
That wasn't in there, but I can add that
Yeah.
to Alan, that we put something in there. Maybe we just don't give them a 6-month lease right off the bat. We ask that there's some way we can terminate it if we get a viable proposal and they want to start construction or occupy the property.
It would be a source of
Prior
income
to
for
that.
the new owner, for one thing. If that might be an eyesore for a few months, but they're going to be working anyways, so it might help them with some of their overhead. But just work with Attorney Jacobson on some verbiage to that effect in the RFP. Okay. Anything else from the committee? Alder Rasmussen?
Thank you. I think the time is right to release this. We held on it last year just because we knew we were in the midst of a pandemic and there was so much uncertainty, and obviously the economy was in no position. But I think that as we start to recover from that and, our area starts to position itself to roar back economically, I think that this is a good time to at least get people looking at the site. And obviously there's going to be time needed for us to vet proposals, to vet developers if there's any, to, look at design renderings. I mean, there's all kinds of time, and I think it's important on the front end that we manage people's expectations, that we're perfectly amenable to a project that perhaps takes flight in 2022. But if people want to get creative now and bring us their best ideas, we certainly want to see them. So I don't see any harm in releasing this and seeing what happens.
Thank you. Alder Watson?
I was looking at the old RFP for it back in the day, and another criteria that I thought was interesting, but I don't know if it's something that we want to include on here for evaluation, is using green technologies in the construction, or incorporating that. That was part of the original.
We typically add, or a lot of times add, language to that effect as something that we would enjoy seeing.
And we do add scoring points for that, right?
Yes, right.
It was worth 10 points in the one from 2019.
Yeah, that would be good to have in our scoring matrix, because
Yeah.
I think if someone takes on that extra front-end cost, it's worthwhile.
Okay. Looking for a motion from the committee.
I guess
Alder Watson.
I would move to release or issue this RFP with the addition of the green technologies and green energies evaluation criteria.
Okay. I have a second from Rasmussen. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? And it carries unanimously. Very good, thank you. All right, we're down to number 6, updates, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Great, thank you very much. Just one item on the agenda here. This is a topic that has been brought up before in regard to affordable housing. The mayor is here with us tonight, and I can tell you that, we've been working diligently to just recognize some of the other housing affordability initiatives that are going on in the community, because they're quite several, and making sure that we have every opportunity to be efficient and unite us all together. Mayor, do you want to go ahead and explain what your initiatives are going forward?
I would love to. So, we talked a little bit a few meetings ago about a task force possibly for affordable housing. I believe the chair of this committee mentioned a czar. There were a couple different things that we talked about. So, first of all, I wanted to make sure that if we went into an undertaking like this, it wasn't redundant. And from what I understood, we did have an affordable housing task force through the United Way. So we spent some time kind of looking through what that is with Ben Lee from United Way. And, there were a couple of things. I mean, they did talk about that. I think it's important to recognize some of the work, but it's really been focused a lot about homelessness right now, which is an important issue. So we talked a little bit about, well, what would we need as for Wausau? So I don't know that what United Way is doing helps us further our policy goals when it comes to affordable housing. So I think that it would probably be a good idea if we went forward and created our own task force. But I have a few caveats, because I think it's important to recognize that Wausau can't do this alone. It's definitely a regional effort. And, I've been on a couple different calls with our Marathon County municipalities, and, even people in Weston and Rothschild, and Rib Mountain, they're talking about what does affordable housing look like in our communities. So I think it would be important if we had a task force that we did include members from other local municipalities to help us talk through what this looks like. I think it's important that we would include advocates or users of affordable housing. I think having that input is really important. We talked about having somebody from the Community Development Authority Board as a member. We talked about maybe 1 or 2 council members. We talked about definitely having the United Way representation. Ben Lee did respond in the affirmative that he would be willing to sign up for another committee. And then we have, North Central Community Action Program, who deals with vouchers and things like that. Would be really great to have somebody from their staff. So I guess what I'm suggesting is that maybe we do need to create something after researching all of the local stuff. And, I think this will be one of those kind of bigger moments of inquiry where we need to do maybe an assessment. We talked to a couple different universities who have engaged in assessments like this, and we looked at what maybe is most important as far as, we have the data, the census data that will tell us some of the information that we've seen in other communities that have spent over $100,000 to find out. So we want to be really strategic about what we're looking for. But I think we can do that. I would like to put maybe a couple of guardrails in for what this task force is looking at, so we don't just go willy-nilly all over the place. So I guess I'm looking for input. I would love to draft an authorizing resolution creating this that the council, you and the council could vote on, but I'm looking for a little bit more input from this body on what you're looking for, or if I'm completely off the rails and not covering what you need here.
Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I love this idea, and I like the idea of talking it through with our neighboring communities, because I think that in one capacity or another, they have similar struggles to what we have, and they always are looking for solutions as well. I think that one of the key first steps is for us to have an accurate inventory of what we have today for low-income housing options and what that looks like. And I don't know, we should network with Tammy Stratz and see if she has any data or any information from within the city's records as far as what an inventory of that type of property looks like. We know what it looks like by census tract, but do we know really how many affordable units actually exist? And how many are we actually short? And, is this an issue of a true shortage of low-income housing, or is it a crisis of opportunity where folks who need low-income housing are having difficulty getting leases from landlords based on records? Or, does the housing exist and people aren't able to tap into it, or does it just not exist? I think that's two questions that we need the group to ferret out the answers for. And, but I love the idea of putting together a group to study the issue that has some real guardrails so that they can stay focused on their mission, and then, let us know really where those deficiencies are, and then we can start to strategize how we attack those deficiencies one by one, if there's action needed.
I do like the idea of networking with our neighbors for this effort. On the other hand, I do wonder about when it comes down to taking action, that we as representatives of the city's, citizens of Wausau, have to act in their best interests, and trying to find all the time consensus across a variety of communities with different issues, might be a pretty large, hope. So I'm a little concerned about that.
I would just like to respond. So the task force would be much like the policing task force, safe elections task force, in that they offer recommendations as opposed to the policy solutions. So you would be able to take those recommendations and figure out how that works for, Wausau.
Right.
Well, you, me, all of us, we
Right.
would be responsible for that.
Which alder had the hand up first over there,
Tom did.
Okay, Alder Killian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I particularly like the inclusion of citizens who are facing these issues, either pursuing affordable housing or maybe losing it. I think that I'd probably bet dollars to donuts that there is indeed a shortage of affordable housing. And also, I think given the macroeconomic climate with COVID and beyond, I think there's a real urgency to this issue, and that we're probably seeing some lag in numbers just because that's the way things go with employment or any other statistics. So I think we could be facing a real devastating prospect in the future when it comes to housing, especially when some of the moratorium on evictions ends and so forth. So and I thought that what Alder Neal had mentioned about keeping it very local, particularly with maybe the flexibility and ease of focus that gives us, I thought that was a great commentary. But whichever way this goes, I think we're not facing a theoretical problem. We're facing a very challenging reality that is very urgent. So I hope we can move as swiftly as possible with action, because I think that our citizens may suffer otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder McElhenney.
Hi, I agree, this is the way to do it. I think that it needs, we have a more strategic look than the city council, deciding to plunk some affordable housing of what, some residents have asked. That isn't how we're going to be able to, solve this issue, because it's ongoing. And I hope that we also, there needs to be kind of a dovetail of services, and I think it's a good time to look at that with CPC coming. We have, transit issues. Are the affordable housing available with public transportation? I think that's another big issue that is going to dovetail into this. Are people with disabilities? I don't hear that a lot, and I'm going to keep banging that drum, because we hear other barriers, but these people use a lot of affordable housing. They need public transit. They work in the community, and I just hope that this has to be you know, we have to include all of these, different factions of our community to make sure that, you know, it is a one big inclusive group looking at this and all the possibilities. So I'm excited for this. I think this is the way to go. I don't think that, you know, a subcommittee of city council is good enough. There's so many issues of why people need affordable housing. There's issues of, you know, I have had, realtors in my neighborhood groups in the past who own some, you know, lower housing and said because of all the you know, the kind of seller's market in the city has raised something that used to be a $400 apartment, now it's going for $700. You know, we have to look at what's driving that, you know, how can we counteract that? So I agree that there's so many different facets, and I hope that we, you know, I hope there's a lot of willing people at the table, and I hope we get the right people who really want to work on this. You know, and I want people to understand we're not going to solve this within a month. We're just not. I think, but we need real data, and the data should come from this group. So I'm excited. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Rasmussen?
Thank you. I agree. I think that we're heading down the right path. I think also, though, one thing we should look at is the direction we take with, you know, our strategic planning. We've, as part of the homelessness task force, one of the things we looked at is, you know, reasons for prolonged homelessness, and one of them was not only the available of low-income housing, but the availability of, you know, leasing and a number of things. And when we talked with Diane Senholtz from North Central Community Action, one of her comments was that she does have funding available to help people with rent assistance, and that one thing we should not panic about is that the day after the eviction moratorium comes off, that all of a sudden there's going to be this gigantic local crisis, because one of the caveats to some of her funding is that while the moratorium remains, she cannot give out that help. And so I think we have to be pragmatic in that. The other thing I think we need to realize is that we have for years had a Section 8 waiting list in Wausau because federal funding for Section 8 rent assistance was, our requests were more than what we had available in vouchers. And so I would certainly hope that as some of these things get rolling at the federal level, because, you know, there has been some movement in finding ways to help people out of this mess, that, you know, perhaps that funding will also become available. And some of the programs that we have been, you know, somewhat restricted by because we couldn't do them big enough, maybe some of that will open up as well. So I think that stuff happening in parallel with the work of this group, you know, will really help us get an accurate picture of what we need to do, and then we can determine what the steps are.
Alder Watson?
So I did attend earlier this, I guess it was Monday or Tuesday, the Stop the COVID Spread Coalition. And I think a lot of what we're talking about with this task force is going to be worked on in that group. And I don't know if it's duplication, because I mean, really, it's not necessarily, I mean, affordable housing is a concern, but there's underlying issues, like you all mentioned, like it's wage disparities, right? I mean, wage growth has been stagnant. Like, so is affordable housing the cure, or is there other things that need to be addressed? And I think a lot of things that came up in that meeting, which was amazing, by the way, I enjoyed myself immensely. I think it led to a lot of, you know, thoughts on how can we get some of these issues that are really the base of the problem, how can we solve it? And a lot of leaders were willing to volunteer to start in that. So I don't know if maybe the task force can work with whatever is created in that, from that Stop the Spread Coalition, or you have ambassadors working with our task force, but I think that would be amazing. And then would it report back to us or the council as a whole?
We can decide that. If you have a preference, I think that we can put that in the authorizing resolution. So I'm open.
Were you talking about the meeting on Monday, Sarah, over the noon hour? I was in on that call as well. The one key takeaway from that, which I loved, was to see healthcare, education, government, stakeholders willing to put their personal goals aside and work together to solve a problem. And the county administrator actually made a fantastic comment towards the end of that call. And he said the one thing that was, perhaps lacking in the past that he has seen through this whole pandemic process was that we were all able to step back and take a measure of humility and try to figure out how we can work together and where we fit in the solution, and really ask ourselves, how can we accomplish something without our immediate reaction to any ideas being 10 excuses why we can't accomplish it. And so that mindset, even in our committees and in our council, really has to carry the day. We have to figure out how to do things versus ruminate about why we can't. And I think that will help us. And so that was a key takeaway from that call. And I think if we all kind of adopt that idea, figure out what we can do versus why we shouldn't, we might be able to move forward on some of this stuff.
Thank you, Alder. Well, that takes us through our agenda for the evening. I would welcome a motion to adjourn. I have one from Watson, a second. I have a second from Killian. All in favor, please say aye, and then bye.